pleasure to be here with all of you. Let me introduce Eric, whom we're so grateful to have with us today. So Eric is the CEO and co-founder at Ramp. Ramp is a finance automation platform designed to help companies save time and money. He started Ramp in 2019 after observing that much of the traditional financial services industry offered points and rewards programs that were misaligned with customers' goals. He and his co-founders sought to build products that would help companies and their employees operate more efficiently. Today, Ramp is the fastest growing corporate card and bill payment software in America. Prior to Ramp, he also founded Paribus, a price tracking app to help consumers save money on their everyday online purchases. Paribus was acquired by Capital One. Born and raised in Las Vegas, Eric now lives in New York City, where he's an active angel investor. Thank you so much for joining us. A real pleasure. I'm very excited about this conversation. Maybe we could start just to make sure. I mean, I'm sure everyone in this room has heard of Ramp, especially after your Super Bowl debut on Sunday. Maybe you can give us just a quick high level, what is Ramp and what it does, to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, of course. By the way, thank you everyone for coming. I hope this is interesting and useful. As with all things advice, try it on, see if it fits. If not, no stress, but hoping to share a little bit of what's been helpful for us. And thank you for hosting us today. It really means a lot. But Ramp, you can think of us as a financial operations platform. From a single place, you can issue cards, make payments of all kinds, automate the collection of receipts, and even automate your accounting. So it just makes it easier to run, whether it's a small business to leading companies like Shopify, Airbnb, CBRE will go and use it. And the result is, if you saw the Super Bowl ad with Saquon Barkley over the weekend, expenses are instant. You want to pull your best players off the field to go and take care of it. We've raised about $2 billion between equity and debt financing. We employ about 1,100 people, and the headquarters is right here in New York City. We're heavy users of AI, both to develop the product as well as just grow a lot more quickly. So we can talk about both sides of that and how we think it's going to change some things.
I'm very excited about that. Now, one thing we were talking about before we started, which I think is fascinating, is not only how you use AI internally, but you basically get to see other companies' accounts. That's basically like peering into everything about a company goes through its accounts. So you really get to see how those companies work. Before we get to that, though, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you came up with the idea, how it began, how it started. We said a little bit that you felt that the competitors were maybe misaligning to consumers' sort of incentives, but tell us a little bit about the genesis.
Yeah, in many ways, like maybe we've only had one original idea ever, but this is sort of a continuation of the last startup that's about 10 years old, or 10 years ago we'd started it, and it was a company called Paribus. And then we just thought it was this weird savings app, but I guess you could call it an AI agent today if I were to rebrand it. And the premise was, let's say you bought something at Amazon, Best Buy, Macy's, whatever, and if the price of what you bought dropped the next week, you could ask for the difference. So we built software that automated it. You could link your Gmail, Yahoo, we would scan your box for receipts, structure the unstructured data, go and track prices, and then what was very unusual 10 years ago is we just sent emails as you to the store. We were kind of your agent.
Wow.
And the next day, their customer service would respond to you, and you'd have some money back, and we charged a cut. Within a year, we had 1 million customers and got a life-changing offer from Capital One to buy it. And so really what we've been thinking about for a long time is how do you use data to go save people money, to go automate some action. We ended up inside of Capital One, which is a fascinating company. The founder is still there, one of the largest banks and credit card companies in the US. And I got to learn how credit cards worked, what made them I saw a business that you could just wait 90 days and $1 billion in profit showed up. And I thought that was pretty cool. I hadn't seen anything quite like that, but there was, some things that got to me, right? I think that it was in some subtle but real ways very misaligned with customers. People were thinking really hard about how do I get my customer to spend more money, open new card accounts. We were the savings people, so we'd ask people, what would get you to open up more cards? Is it cash back? Is it points? Something different? And if you really listen to people, they'd say, I just want more in my bank account. And if you just think through the math of that, it's pretty straightforward. Don't spend $100 on something you don't need. 100 times better than getting $1 back on that purchase. Why don't we have cards that are designed to help people spend less in the first place? Better for customers. And we think it could be better for the business too. You could compete on value, not on price. And so, not even 6 years ago, we left to start Ramp, and that was the genesis.
Wow.
It's evolved a lot from just saving money to saving time too. But that's how we got here.
Cool. Very, very cool. Let's jump to AI.
Okay, sure.
Topic on everyone's mind. Let's actually begin, if I may, and I wasn't even planning to ask this, but it just comes to mind based on our conversation before. How are companies using AI? Like, what are you seeing from your bird's eye view? What is the penetration of the technology? How are they using it? What are they spending on? I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So as background on some of this, we go pretty deep into this. If any folks listen to Odd Lots, we were on a couple weeks ago with the team, and the data that we have insight into is company credit card data, bill payment data, so invoices, wires, reimbursements, and the like. At the start of 2024, this was over $10 billion per year. At the close of last year, it was well over $50 billion. So it gives you a sense of how quickly it's growing and the level of the panel data. I can tell you straight away, the usage of AI is already a lot higher than what people expect. If you look at kind of government data about adoption of AI in businesses and enterprises, you'll see estimates of around 6 to 7% usage.
That's the government estimates.
That's the government estimates. In our panel data, it's a little more tech forward, but not much in the rest of the country. We're seeing 30, 40% adoption.
30 or 40%.
Of people are trying it. And you're seeing very different behavior. If you looked in the year 2024, 2023, if someone tried an AI tool, there was a 50% chance that within a month they would churn. This was very experimental. People were trying things, seeing what works. If you looked at that same data 12 months later, 70% of people would be staying the following month. It's continuing to grow dramatically. And so you're seeing a shift of AI move from experimental to really this is how companies are getting built. You're seeing types of usage. It's not just in engineers. You're seeing the fastest growing companies, sales teams are using heavy AI augmentation.
So actually, that leads to my question. What do you call AI? Meaning, what do you see that tells? Obviously, if they're paying OpenAI for the API, that's AI. Yeah. What else do you classify as kind of AI, and how's that split?
Great question. So it's certainly capturing the foundation model companies, right. OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft Azure, in particular, not around storage, but around kind of the inference model. We're seeing kind of AI native products. This could be, 11 Labs if you're going and doing voice generation. This could be Cognition or Cursor for some of the AI coding agents. Two, there's even new age tools where it's actually you can hire AI sales development representatives or AI design. And so we're cutting it fairly narrowly. What we're not doing is capturing things like Salesforce where
but there's some AI included.
Yeah,
I see.
Exactly.
Wow, so 30-40% just for these like purely sort of really sort of AI tools. Yeah. And how does it split between the kind of foundations versus people using sort of derivative companies, for lack of a better term?
It's super interesting. I mean, I think that the heavy emphasis is still on the foundation models.
Okay, so it's still a lot of spend on the foundation, Anthropic, OpenAI,
it is.
et cetera, as your...
And the difference between the two, just if folks are active in this area, OpenAI is really known for ChatGPT, and you see, I think about 75% of their business, people estimate, is that consumer side. And so this is individual people using it of, write this email, but make it sound more mean, or, help me find...
It sound more mean.
Stern and direct if I need something done. Okay, great. To Anthropic is an amazing leader, particularly on engineers building and using their API in order to build it inside a product. So they show up differently in terms of the usage. But
very, very cool. Would you put down, you said, there used to be a very low conversion rate. Now when people use AI once, they just keep it. Do you think the AI has just gotten better? Is there something to do with the market? Would you put that down to?
It's a combination of things. I mean, one, I just think generally when you use and adopt technology as a builder, the pace of change in the world is rather linear. You can kind of start to see, okay, if things get 10% better, 20% better, it can work. The very strange part about building with AI now is you have things that just categorically did not work a year ago, just works. You can now truly have a great conversation with the computer. It can hear, it can see, it can reason. Even the reasoning models and critic models did not exist as a concept in a real high production way a year ago, and now it does. And so I think most of the usage is, it actually just is helpful.
People kind of trust it now, I guess, in the sense that, that's why ChatGPT was such an amazing thing. We were used to chatbots being annoying, and now suddenly they could respond.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I think that's right.
Let's pivot to what you do within sort of Ramp. I'm super interested in that. I think, when people hear AI, if you go to a person in the street and say, what is AI? They'll say ChatGPT, they'll say chatbot, sort of. in some ways it's a bit of a bugbear of mine because I think chatbots are really cool, really amazing. In some ways, they're what excites me the least about AI, right? In the sense, they're there, they work, they're fine, and sort of, they can do a lot of things. But I think a lot of the value can be generated with sort of broader uses of AI. I wonder whether A, you agree, and B, whether you can give us kind of an overview of how you use AI at RAM, sort of what the different use cases are, some of the ones you find perhaps most interesting.
It's a great question. So first, I do agree, right? I think for a long time, people and I felt the capabilities of these large language models, the things they knew,
right.
The capabilities were far beyond people's understanding. And I can tell you we work very closely, like our co-founder, my co-founder Kareem taught computer science with Greg Brockman, who later became one of the co-founders of OpenAI. They're close partners, and ChatGPT caught everyone by surprise.
100%.
I think there was something special about chat in that it was put into a form factor that people could see it. And
people suddenly realized how powerful it was.
Worked.
It was just,
But I think one of the debates which ensued there is it's a very strange design pattern. You ask one thing, you get one response. The interesting thing about these models is that it can branch off depending on the direction that you want to go, but you don't see it. It forces a discrete kind of direction. Right. And I think that there was this phase of AI washing everyone's product. We have AI and you just slap a chatbot on it. Right. It's ridiculous. But I think that the really interesting use cases are maybe in sort of two classes. One, from a product perspective, what we're putting in front of customers, there's a heavy usage around zero-touch AI. You don't call it AI, but actually, and you're not even asking it, but suddenly things are getting smoother. That can be like kind of the core ramp experience that was in the Super Bowl ad. You go and you get a text saying you had this expense, add your receipt. You send an image, that's all you do, and we're able to match that to a transaction. Right. We can go connect to your calendar and see who you were meeting, add all the attendees without having to ask you. We can go and you can upload a receipt if you're buying 4 honey deuces or something like that at the US Open, and we know there's alcohol in it. There isn't an interaction at all. I don't need to ask.
There's a lot of AI in the background, but you have no idea. In some
exactly.
Senses. Yeah,
so it's making everything much smoother. I think is a heavy emphasis, and I think as that starts to really get brought in line and built into products, I think just the world's going to feel smoother. The second, I think, mega trend right now, and the hopes that people have is around agentic AI. Which I know is something we talked a little bit about before, but it's almost, if you can think about it, Paribus, the business we had built a decade ago, is maybe this like caveman version of it, where you buy something, you don't ask it to do it, but then it goes and asks for a rebate. It's a very narrow use case. If it can get you refunds just on a certain class of things, I think that the hope is that the sets of things that agents can do can be a lot broader. And so maybe some of the more ambitious versions of this, maybe like Devin and Cognition, where you say, hey, Devin, which is a digital being thing, right. I want to build a new website, make it look like this, and then it writes the repo. It has access to a browser. It has planning tools and capabilities of it, and it can do much more complex coordination that hasn't been discreetly written. Right. And so I think those types of things you're going to see a lot more of, and last, a lot of just human augmentation, a lot of productivity.
And you're using agents at Ramp?
We are. Okay. And so I'll give you one example that's been very, very real. So a lot of people know that we are the fastest growing company in New York. We think one of the fastest growing companies in the world. For many folks, if you've ever worked in sales, the first job there is a role called the sales development representative. And your job is to go out there, book meetings, figure out who you can get on the calendar, who you can later go and close. And the way this job used to be done, and I believe still is done at most companies, is you go and try to figure out on your own who's a good lead. You see who just raised money. You look at industry lists. You go try to guess their email. You then go write an email on yourself and see what happens. You send some things out. You get a response. You call them up right away. You qualify, and then you bring it through. It's this really manual work. Today at Ramp, there are entire teams that don't write any emails, actually. It's AI that is doing this. It's decomposing web traffic. It's looking at who are companies out there that have raised. It's reading news. It's going and seeing what's happening in different industries. It's running A/B tests on its own to figure out what's the best copy that actually works for certain types of companies. And the job of a sales development representative at Ramp is actually call someone who is qualified who responds to you within a minute, and then focus on the human connection of it. And so it's a job that look, actually, these SDRs are about probably now 5 to 6 times more productive in terms of meetings books than our next closest competitor. But it's a radically different job that has changed dramatically.
Right, no, 100%.
Today,
One point though on agentic AI, maybe this is just me being a snooty academic, I sometimes get a little, for me, agentic AI is just you take non-agentic AI and you give it access to a Python script pretty much, right? I mean, it's sort of in sense what it does. Am I wrong about that? Like, is there something I'm missing in some sense? Do you think it's greater than the sum of its parts? Like, is there something that's really, like, how is it? I mean, as you said, Paribus was doing agentic AI 10 years ago. How is this why has suddenly people started talking about agentic AI in the last 6 months, a year, why has it sort of exploded so much? Is it just a question of people suddenly started paying attention to it? Or do you think there's actually a technical breakthrough that makes agentic AI much more than just, ChatGPT with Python?
I think it's two main things. One is just the sheer scale of the data. If you think about machine learning 10 years ago, I mean, you can use large data sets, but these were generally, very structured. Okay, this is a risk model, and we're going to go and figure out where, who's the good credit, who's the bad credit. Right. The strange part about AI now is it's read everything on the internet. Everything. It's read a lot of things.
The step change in what it can do and knows.
And so some of it, I think, is a fair assessment of, technically, there's some interesting tooling things that we've done to make it work in production. But I think part of it is just the sheer scale of the data, and the world models are much broader. I think that the second breakthrough, and I think that's been particularly happening over the past 2 years, is the usage of reasoning, and it's easy to sort of understand in the context of a critic model. Like here, I think a very common method of kind of learning and reasoning is, someone the teacher asks a question, you give a response. Teacher says, well, did you consider it from this perspective? Oh, you're right, I hadn't.
The way it works at CBS, by the way, is you ask a question and there's silence. No.
Oh, no.
And then
not
you pick
here.
up someone. No.
Other schools.
Many of my students in the room will know.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Everyone obviously responds. Go on.
No, but it's maybe it's the Socratic method, something like that. But, you look at, maybe state-of-the-art optical character recognition models of reading an invoice a year ago, 92% if you took a 20-page invoice accuracy, which is pretty good, but means 1 out of 10 things is wrong. Right. So you need to audit a lot of it. As we started to introduce kind of steps in reasoning and chain of thought, effectively within a couple of days, the accuracy on 20-page invoices jumped to 99.5%.
Wow.
That fast.
A huge jump.
And so some of it is, there is really clever production engineering that's happening. And
maybe, to the extent you can tell us, and not going too deep, can you tell us a little more about what that actually means to introduce reasoning for invoices? I mean, I think people will be interested.
Oh, for sure.
That's a huge jump.
I mean, so one, mechanically, if you sort of take that first run of, okay, this is an invoice, I want you to structure all the data, all that. Okay, great. There's models that we're running effectively in parallel that will take the output of the process, will have the initial documents, and then say, okay, I want you to go scan through, be really precise about it. Next, here's other invoices that we've now structured and seen, okay, it kicks off another batch. This is other invoices from this business as well, and here was previous changes and corrections that had been made. Consider these corrections. Now look, can you find other additional corrections?
I see. And it's almost like a room of experts, but each expert is an LLM, and they each, or some sort of Gen AI model, and each of them are doing sort of a particular check or a particular perspective.
Exactly right.
Okay.
So you have models that are checking the work of other models. And so if you kind of hear some of, people weren't wondering about kind of like fast takeoff and what's going on, there's a lot of conjecture and belief that kind of future large models are going to be trained by their models. And I can tell you in production of checking and improving the performance of certain models, you see that already. Okay. And so some of this is, just the simple form of you have a large model, you have kind of your local data, and you kind of see the output, and then we can train it on our own ramp data and kind of continuously improve that. And so if you kind of look at, that's it in a nutshell. It obviously gets a lot more sophisticated.
Sure. No, that's very, very interesting. Cool. Tell me a bit about, AI has been, it's changed names over the years, but it's been around for a while, right? The standard predictive analytics. You got a table with customer data. You want to predict whether they're going to default on a credit card or not. That's been around for a while, right? Arguably, the FICO score was that sort of a long time ago. Yeah. Tell me the extent to which I assume that's still very useful. I assume that's still very much in production somewhere like Ramp and elsewhere. Tell me, first of all, I guess some examples of where that is and where you've decided we're not going to, just throw Gen AI at everything. Sometimes we just need simpler models. And is there a way that maybe the Gen AI augments these classical models? Like, how is that sort of interplay between the good old-fashioned, tried and tested, reliable stuff and the new, really exciting Gen AI stuff, which we're still sort of, figuring out how to do?
Yeah. So one, I'll just give like a general backdrop in ways that the model that we think about this. Right? If you looked at early programming, right, everything was done in punch cards, machine codes. Things evolved into COBOL, into Objective-C, and every one of these programming languages are effectively some way of man and machine communicating with each other.
Right.
And there's increasing levels of abstraction, but it's this strange tug of war of how do you take this, from the way that we think and whether it's precisely or imprecisely, and what machines go do and run. And doing that successfully has required understanding of how machines work and how do you be precise on it. And the history of that is, one, as you've increasingly make programming languages more abstract, it turns out more people can access the power of what computers can do. As you kind of jump from C to Python, even order of magnitude more level of programmers. And I think there's a fair line of argument that goes of, the next mega programming language is, we're debating this, English, or pick your language. You won't need to learn programming. And I think that generally is true. I think more people are going to be able to make that next app, build that thing you're thinking about really quickly and iterate on it. And as you get an output, you can have a conversation with these models and tweak this. And I think that's actually really, really good. Problems with English is it's imprecise, sounds different, lots of different ways to say the same thing. One sentence can be interpreted in multiple ways. But I think over time, you can kind of tune it and train it and deal with it. And I guess what I would say is that for certain things where it is a batch process, it is high accuracy, you know exactly how to do it very discreetly, I think very discrete programming is very, very good. However, if you're starting to take into account lots of different data points and very complex workflows, that based on a lot of inputs, you're going to go and generate your output. It's much more efficient to actually start to apply generative processes on it. And so I'll give you an example where you could build. I think part of what makes Ramp very powerful is you can tap a card. We can maybe pull the receipt from your Gmail. We can text you from it. You get a receipt. We then take that data from your calendar, data from your HR system. We know who you report to who. And put it into your accounting software at the end of the day, and then connect unstructured data. There's no such thing as a canonical merchant in Visa or MasterCard, and we can correctly identify in your general ledger, which is also another language that accountants keep, as to how to classify transactions and pull things over. In the old way of programming, you could go and build a huge if this then that table. If you're in this department, this location, it's in this decision tree, in this tree of objects in your general ledger, go and categorize UBR star 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as Uber. Or now you can say, okay, here's the raw data into an LLM. What merchant do you think this is? And where would you put it in the accounting software? And it turns out it is way faster to get to a right answer in the second way. And actually, rather than trying to figure out all the is this and that and the permutations, you just build in like your first shot and some checks on it and good logic to kind of go and back pattern against it. So you can accomplish the same thing with a lot fewer lines of code. Actually, if you are classifying and categorizing in an AI first kind of way.
Interesting.
And so I think the thing that's bizarre is that now with new ways of programming and new ways of thinking, you can accomplish a lot more with orders of magnitude, fewer lines of code, less time, and less expertise required. That's been cool.
And I guess, do you ever use situations where one thing I've been very excited about is the idea of, as you say, something like resolving a merchant name to the true merchant. That's something that Gen AI can be very useful for. I've seen some people try and say, okay, well, let's say we have a fraud model, let's say. We have a classical model, we have a regression, a random forest, whatever it might be. We're still going to use that model, but now we're going to augment it with Gen AI to say, let's say there's free text inside the transaction. We're going to use Gen AI to sort of munge that free text and then put those numbers into a classical model. Is that sort of a framework that you've used or found useful?
I think that's exactly right. And to your point too, I mean, there's certain areas where I think fraud and credit models and search are some of the most cutting edge areas for classic machine learning.
Right.
And so actually some of the low hanging fruit is maybe the lowest there. You can get improvements, but I think what some of the classic models have done for us are very far ahead. But then you look at things that are, you talk about all this advanced stuff and you're like, well, wait, you're automating expense reports. And, at the same time, I can tell you, like, most people you meet spend an hour every month on expense reports, and it's insane. Wow. The whole transaction is digital. There's no reason it should be automated.
It's completely crazy.
And you can actually stitch together.
It almost feels like busy work. You're just creating this sort of,
And I think that's the promise of it. Like, I think that if you look at, one, in general, like, I think like the macro thing that we think about is over the past, I think the most alarming stat for me is, productivity. The amount of output per worker in the U.S. has been in decline functionally for 60 years.
That's something you think you can improve or fix?
Well, I think so, right? Like, in just to set the stage, like in the 1960s, the output per worker, people made 3% more stuff every year. Wow. I think if you looked kind of 10 years ago, it was about 1% more stuff per worker per year, which I think has a lot to do with, decline in general wealth. I think a lot of concerns for the middle class. I think it's very connected, and I think there's a lot of drivers. Some of this is we outsource job. I think the others is firms got a lot bigger, so it meant that a lot more people were spending time on just tabulating things, counting the beans versus asking where do we invest, dealing with emails and back and forth to come to a decision. And I think now that you can crunch so many, vaster sets more data, you can automate so many pieces of busy work. I think you can actually restore people to
doing what matters,
doing the work, building things, not managing, the work and product.
And so it sounds like, at least on the debate of whether AI is going to replace us or augment us, you seem to be on the augment side, it sounds like, in terms of augment our productivity, do the busy work, and then we can actually do what matters.
I feel certain of that for the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
I think at some scale, this technology is improving so quickly, it's hard to really know as you go out, but I do. Cool. I think this is part of why Office Space is such an amazing movie, right? Is like it resonates and it sort of connects to this truth that a lot of work, you come and you learn about kind of world-changing ideas here, and you have all these ambitions, and then you go to a bank and suddenly you're just uploading you're updating the same spreadsheet. You're applying this model to that company. It's very little fundamentally new and interesting work. And I think we have the chance to just make that smooth.
One thing that struck me a lot, and this is just my personal experience, it's not necessarily scientific, but I think despite all these advances we talk about, I found that AI is very good at doing stuff that I would find easy, time-consuming but easy. Mm-hmm. It's not as good at doing things like, putting together a list of questions for this panel. It'll come up with some questions, you look at them and you're like, those sound good, but then I look into them and I'm like, not really actually. I want to modify them. So in some ways, I think that backs your point of view where, the stuff it's really good at is the stuff that I find uninteresting, boring, but takes a long time and it's just easy to do. Yeah. Whereas the more creative stuff, at least right now, and who knows, it's just my experience, but yeah.
I tend to agree. And look, like for me, an eye-opening experience with this was, I know everyone here is very into football. Maybe people saw the ad a couple weeks ago, but 2 weeks ago, we did not know we were going to do a Super Bowl ad.
Wow.
We had been working with Saquon Barkley and his people to...
2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago. Well, like we were going to collaborate on something, and then someone said, should we do a Super Bowl ad? And we reached out, and they were like, sure, let's do it. And we had no idea what we were in for. And doing an ad with less than 2 weeks before the actual appearance, the actual airing, doing it with someone who's playing in the Super Bowl, right? And dealing with that schedule and putting it together. And some of it was just the basic. We had to actually really understand and do this in production. But I think one of the things that caught us all by surprise, and I think was incredible, is we actually made 300 different versions using AI before we ever met with Saquon in person in Philadelphia to go and shoot it. We were actually able to generate, here's what this ad would look like. The narrator that you heard, it was only the very last take that we used a person. We were generating, we were doing all the narration. We were doing different wardrobe stylings, lightings, different scenarios. And so we could actually go and compress what would have been months of actual work into, okay, let's actually go and run it. And so what I would say is, like, if I asked a model to go and generate a, I don't think it's quite yet going to give something that's better than a person, but it is...
really gets you through that grunt work of sort of getting there.
It is like a sports car for like people's productivity if you know how to use it. And so I think there's like a broader point I would say too of most people wouldn't think to know how to use it. I think most people's experience. I was talking to I like to talk to people on planes. Like I was talking to a flight attendant a couple days ago. Is how to use and she cracked me up. It's like, I mostly use it if I have this email and make it sound more stern or find the typos for me. And I really like that, but I feel like it can do more. I thought it was great. It's probably ahead of what most people are using it for. But the capabilities are far beyond, I think, what most people really understand. Right, really, and just starting to get a sense of it will surprise you. It goes, I think you'll find use cases for it. And then you learn the interesting questions. You see what it can't do yet. Maybe you'll find new businesses there to go and build.
Very cool. What was the biggest unexpected pitfall or difficulty or hurdle in terms of implementing Gen AI?
Oh my gosh. Well, so there's all sorts of things. First, we were talking about this beforehand. Like, I think some of it just starts with mindset, right? Like I'm sure Blockbuster had wonderful strategy consultants. They probably read and saw in case studies that there's this thing called streaming and the internet, and it's coming for you too. They had a lot of years after the dot-com bubble. They had a chance to do it. And I'm sure they even had some experts on like this whole streaming thing. Right. And I think that the danger actually for most businesses and most people is, well, I'm going to learn a little bit of streaming stuff in my spare time and I'm going to apply it onto that business. And the reality is the Netflix people came on and they said, this is the new paradigm. It radically changes the physics of how this business is going to be done. And they steamrolled them. And I think that this is such a categorical change that if you are saying, I'm going to sprinkle in some AI here and learn some practices there, I think you might be in trouble, actually. I think that if you sort of take what are some of the capabilities of it and then come back to, again, what RAMP is doing is actually very timeless. I think businesses, for as long as there have been businesses, have sought to be more profitable, to spend less, to get more done with less effort. And really, we're a productivity company masquerading as a fintech. Right. We help people, buy the same things for less and do things like accounting and expense reports and payables with a lot less work in it. And so we use AI as really, technological shift in tool that allows us to deliver that more efficiently. And so I guess what I would say here in the context is, really getting familiar. You don't need to be generating foundation models, but kind of understanding how do I be a practitioner of these tools?
I guess that dovetails really nicely into, what keeps me up at night is, how do I teach MBAs? How do I teach students here on being productive with these things? And my theory, which I hope you can either support or disprove, both will be very interesting, or sort of disagree with, is that, it's all very nice and well. Of course, table stakes is knowing how to use ChatGPT, knowing how to prompt ChatGPT, seeing what it can do, ideating in terms of productivity it can improve. But I really think there's a benefit, even to someone who won't be an engineer, to knowing the Python isn't a snake, to knowing what an API is, to querying the OpenAI API, to understanding a little bit of how these models work. And it sounds like you agree.
I really do. I am, I've worked now in fields related to software engineering for quite some time, but I was an econ major and I studied, East Asian studies and Mandarin. I didn't have a strong background in it, but there was one class that I took in college, was Introduction to Computer Science, and it was incredibly helpful in actually understanding, how to sort of think about what systems are really great at doing. How do you write code? What are their strengths? What are some of the fallbacks? And I think now everyone has access to some of the most powerful capabilities of all time. You can spin up effectively the computational knowledge of 1,000 people if you know how to use it. And so I think the more important things to study are, beyond just getting a sense of comfort, really using it, feeling it out, but systems thinking. It's, generally...
Like, how does LLM A interact with my website, interact with a person, interact with Model B? Like, how does this all sort of play together?
Coupled with, even something as simple as, if you wanted to hire someone before, you put up your JD, you interview a bunch of people, and then voila, you have an intern. And then you have a couple months, you can work and you can give people that. I don't think most people would know what to do if you said, would you like to hire 100 interns that report to you this summer? What you would do with that, it would be a mess. But the reality is, in some sense, I think you kind of can do that now, actually. And how do you stitch together the work happening across a lot of work streams in a very compressed time period? And so I think that, there's talks of, who's going to be the first 10-person billion-dollar revenue company. It's going to happen. Who's going to be the first one person? I think it's going to start to happen as time goes on, as a lot less of the nature of companies is the work of doing work. It's the grind. It's the coordination, and actually you can start to just build systems using intelligence on each other. And so I would sort of be thinking in some sense about the management of resources. How do you sort of connect and chain things together? I think that's how modern companies are going to be built increasingly.
Very cool. Let me get back to the question on challenges and pitfalls. I think it's very interesting that you say that one of the biggest challenges in some ways is changing your thinking to realize that, you need to do things differently. From a technical perspective, I'm curious about did you find that, I don't know, the APIs cost more than expected, less than expected, computational power was the problem, models misbehaving and doing things that were crazy was the problem? What I would say, what are the things, your engineers spend most of their time on other than ideating and figuring out, which obviously is very important?
It's a super good question. So one, we can confirm this is true, and there was a lot of talk around this when DeepSeek came out even a couple of weeks ago. Is the cost of this stuff is dropping dramatically.
Right.
Maybe the foundation model companies have a problem or don't. We could debate all that. But as a company that is not training but is applying these models, we think it's a wonderful time. I think that the cost of intelligence is going to zero over time. And there's this funny thing, this term I'm sure people know of called the Jevons paradox, where the cheaper something gets, in some sense, if it's very useful, the more that people use. We see that very clearly in the data when you see, even within days, an order of magnitude level drop of prices. Suddenly people are using and calling APIs 100%, 200%, 300% more. And if you play it forward a month or two, often the actual number of dollars being spent has already surpassed it.
How difficult is it for you? DeepSeek comes out. How difficult is it? And again, let's not use that specific example, just in the sense of I don't want necessarily for you to reveal the sort of secrets, but how long does it take you to switch from we're using Model X and now we're going to switch to Model Y? Is that sort of...
I'll give you a very specific example. Yeah. So if you were to look at the data in early 2024 of which foundation model companies are people spending on, it would be... There'd be one game in town. It was OpenAI.
Right.
I think 96% of all spend on foundation models that we could see just went to them. And if you were sort of thinking cloud and classic SaaS business models, you would say they have an unstoppable moat. People will never switch, because if your data is in Oracle or ERP or AWS, it's too complicated to move everything. You look at that same data point a year later, the market share of OpenAI was still strong, 80%. However, Anthropic had jumped from 4% to 17% within a year's time. And you wonder, how could that possibly happen? It turns out it's just one line of code that you need to change. You say, I'm going to give this data payload and send it to this model instead of that one. Right. Or frankly, send it to all of them and just preference the model that is more accurate and cheaper. And so,
but the prompts are not different. You don't have to change something about the way you architect the
some level. It's a lot of it is actually what is the testing suite that you have around, and you're evaluating the quality of outputs for individual models, the cost, and if you're chaining together lots of different responses, you can figure out, in certain cases, where do you go? And in another one that would maybe to draw it out, when there was a switch from GPT-4 to the GPT-4 Mini, and the cost dropped by an order of magnitude. There was a hedge fund that reached out. We can't be too specific about how exactly everything changes, but they asked what's going on? How should we think about this? And we said, well, look, it's not that it's 90% accurate. What's changed, is if you look at the stats that OpenAI had put out, it says, hey, it's 10% of the cost, but
Sure.
works 90% as well. What you would see in the data is it turned out it was 100% accurate. It was just as accurate for 90% of things. And so the job was to figure out what were the
Which
90%
are the 10%
of things,
that we need to switch
and you
to?
route all of that,
Very
and then you take
interesting.
the last 10% to the expensive model and you route it there.
Very interesting.
And so it's in general...
It's like managing Silicon employees. I mean, that's the kind of mode, and the name of the game here is to figure out how you sort of manage them like employees, pretty much.
Exactly. How do you get the same job done as efficiently? Right. And so in general, I tend to be quite bullish on this category of applied AI. I would argue that Ramp is an applied AI company, right? We're here to automate your expenses, to automate your accounting, to help your business run on a lot fewer dollars. And we're going to go and monetize like a finance company, but then sort of automate increasing amounts of work for our
It's almost a higher version of what we were talking about before, where you are taking the difficult parts of the automation that are sort of time-consuming, as you say, and outsourcing those to those AIs. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, and there's a lot of directions this could go, right? Like if you sort of think about a heavy portion of work is knowledge work, right? Is white collar work, and so I think there's a lot of industries that suddenly are going to be possible to go. And I think that the broader shift in conversation people are thinking about is, well, take SAP. They create a lot of productivity software for people. They could have Concur, they have accounting software and all that. One of the most fascinating stats that I learned recently is that for every dollar SAP's $300, $400 billion company makes in revenue, it turns out their partners, the Accentures, the Deloittes, the small accounting firms, that whole ecosystem, if you add up all the revenues they make selling and maintaining SAP software, it's about $13 to $15, depending on you count it, for every $1 SAP needs.
Wow.
Labor is a much larger market. And so there's a question, if you've heard these categories of like service as software, is there actually areas where you can do work, frankly, the implementation for companies that was, one is just much larger, but two was never addressable. And then, by the way, too, I think that if you can cut all this waste out, companies succeed a lot faster, get bigger, can deploy not just on just the sheer weight of doing things, but making new things. Like I'm quite bullish about what that means for the world. But I think a good time to be at business school.
Yeah. Last question for you before maybe we can get the mics around. You have some mics? Wonderful. So just one last quick question for you, because I can't resist. How do you deal with, I mean, clearly the AI gets it wrong sometimes, right? It's going to classify the wrong receipt to the wrong whatever. Tell me a little bit about how you deal with that challenge. You must have some engineering steps that sort of deal with that.
Oh yeah, totally. No, and we get this question a lot of, isn't it the end of the world if you don't pass an audit, if your accounting is wrong? And by the way, it turns out a lot of companies don't pass audits, or that's why there's auditors to go check the work. It turns out people make mistakes, unfortunately, and you can design systems to deal with faults, to build in checks and corrects. And so I'd say the most simple framework is you design it actually to go and figure out where things are going to be incorrect. Right. But the interesting part is, if you take that framework of for 90% of things, it's 100% right. If we can go and in one shot, 95% of your books are done, and we're going to review just the last 5%. That's the style of thinking that we found has been extremely useful in system building.
In some ways, that's the most crucial. An AI that can tell you, I'm not so sure, is sort of going to be much more powerful.
That's right.
Cool. Let's open it up to questions. Let's see, I see a hand. Maybe let's get a microphone in the back over there and a microphone over here. So this gentleman, we have a microphone on that side of the room. Okay, I guess we'll start back there. Is there another mic?
Hi. I know you alluded to DeepSeek and some of the open source models. And what are your thoughts on kind of incorporating them, because they kind of definitely present a more affordable economic solution to kind of going with OpenAI or Anthropic. And over time, that could become even cheaper and more affordable for apply at companies like yourself.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, so even in our data set, I think we put out research probably about 2 weeks ago. We saw that probably about 0.2% of businesses were using DeepSeek already. Some of that is just related to security concerns, not knowing exactly how the model is built, plus in the context of companies. Often they have agreements with their customers of, we're going to keep your data private, and we are going to force our vendors to keep the data private and to not train on it. Now with DeepSeek, because it's really open source, they're not making those commitments. You're seeing limited enterprise adoption, but you do see individuals using it in a big way. And I think that generally when costs come down at other players, I think it forces the costs of everyone to go and lower it. And so whether it's DeepSeek directly or others, I'm very convinced, and I think it's very clear the cost of just of inference is going to be dropping fairly dramatically. Whether it's half an order to full order of magnitude every year depends on a few things, but I think that's exactly right.
Thanks, Eric, for being here with us. I work in FP&A, so a lot of appreciation for what Ramp is doing. Just a question around Ramp's positioning in the marketplace. There's a lot of different players there, Embers, SAP Concur, et cetera. So when you're pitching Ramp to new clients, what are some of the things that you're telling them that Ramp is able to do that the others aren't, or maybe you're just doing it better? And then in the situation, I'm curious where, perhaps Ramp isn't providing a whole suite of services. How have you all developed the product to interface with other, systems and tools that companies use? Because a huge pain point, I'm sure is that like the systems don't talk to each other. So like, how have you developed the product in order to do that?
Love the question. So one, I think stepping back, fintech to me is one of the most fascinating parts of the market because, if you looked 20 years ago, even 15, if you weren't a bank, you were not really allowed to move money. And so it meant as the world went from no phones to flip phones to iPhones, your credit card basically stayed the same and people built these aftermarket solutions. Like you buy it on your Amex and then the next day or the next month, you upload your receipt somewhere else. And so it's kind of bizarre when you think about it that everyone accepts as normal that to buy a cup of coffee or a piece of software, you're going to integrate multiple tools. That's like, you enter the phone number in one phone, then you use some other app to call someone. Like it's strange. It should all just be one thing. And so the original very powerful pitch that we had to companies was, we're just going to integrate your expense policy into the physical card. So if it's out of policy, we'll decline it. If it works, we'll text you the minute that your receipt's in your hand. You snap a photo of your receipt and you're done. And so we could go to companies and say that the average receipt on Ramp is turned in within 30 seconds. The average receipt on Concur is turned in within 30 days. So everyone has to keep books open. It's a super pain. You can't close stuff. And so for a lot of companies, that was phenomenal. That wasn't just differentiation, it was order of magnitude better. And I think that it was part of why we've been growing. We're one of the fastest growing companies to go from 0 to 100 million in revenue in history was, we weren't competing quite directly with Concur. We also aren't competing quite directly with American Express or with accounting automation. We could sort of just take out multiple at once. And I think that the broader backdrop is we're going to take this strange schism between money moves here and software happens here, and we're just going to slowly Pac-Man some of that up. So you can have one tool to run all of your payments and all of your software automations on it is the goal.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. I think it builds on the question. I saw that you guys also unveiled a treasury product for companies like almost 10, 15 days ago. So what are the sort of suite of products that you're going to be launching to sort of compete with the Mercury or Brex, where sort of companies can eventually just start putting all your money on Ramp and then doing complete services through Ramp itself?
It's great. I love that. So first, the really fascinating thing, so I'll start with even just our core product of spend management cards. We are already about 1% to 2% of all corporate and small business card spend in the US, and that's made us a very large business, but yet someone at the company pointed out it's a fancy way of saying you have 98 to 99% of the market to go. And so while we're the largest of the startups, we're often going against, it's Chase, it's B of A, it's Capital One, it's Citi, it's products that are pretty unaspiring. And, when you look at banking, which we had effectively were treasury, it's really a subset of it, was our first foray 9 days ago into the market. I love thinking about some of the new age players. The reality is the average business in the US today is earning 0.00% on their checking account. The average dollar stored by a business is earning 0.07%. And we can come out and say, we would like to be the Costco for businesses. We are going to give you the majority of all of the treasuries that we'll make. And you can, as a business, keep 2.5% on any dollar that's in checking straight away, no problem. And I think that's very depositioning for businesses that frankly haven't had to work that hard to help their customers for a very long time. And so a lot of what we're doing is actually just addressing and hopefully trying to make everyone a little better in the old guard. I think when you start looking at new businesses over time, and okay, do we use some advanced tools in in banking and some in spend management? I think over time, really what we're trying to do is make things go from feeling kind of steer assist to we'll make it easier to run to your entire finances are increasingly self-driving. You can start wherever you want to start with, but to all of our customers, we'll point out, hey, click this button if you want to earn an extra $10,000 in interest per year. We'll go and move this over there, and maybe others will invent a similar button to compete with us, and that's probably good for businesses over the long term. But that's the goal, is actually to build more intelligence and make it very seamless and easy for businesses to take action and do better.
The mic at the back, I think.
Hey, Eric. Really appreciate it. And as a customer of Ramp, I kind of very much related to Saquon on that commercial there.
Yeah.
I think the last question really shows that you're going well beyond, I guess, what you've already built in just terms of, billing and spending automation. So, when I prompt O1, what do you know a lot about Ramp, you know what they do. Where do you think they can take it? And says things like advanced budget analysis, market mix modeling, compliance monitoring, ROI analysis on expense, like what if scenarios. So what you're pitching here is like not just replacing this tool with that tool. It's kind of building it up from a ground one, really revolutionizing it. So what gets you excited? How far can you go?
Love it. Look, I thank you for being a customer. That makes me very happy. And if there's anything we can do better, come find me afterwards. But I think thinking about the founding questions for companies is a very important exercise. A lot of companies, if they ever have a first successful product, it's stuck in the form factor of that product. We didn't start this company to be the best credit card or to have like the coolest bill payment software of anything. Our mission and our reason for being is to help companies spend less time and spend less money so they can get more done with less, to be more productive. And when you ask different questions, you come to different insights. We realize if you really care about helping people spend less time, you shouldn't integrate with Concur or Expensify. You should have one tool where you tap a card and your expense report is done. As time goes on, though, it's important to remind people we're not slinging cards. We're not doing this stuff. We exist to help make companies more profitable. So we are in the business of trying to do that. And wherever we can go to help our customers get more done with fewer dollars and fewer hours, we intend to do it. So what do we think about it?
There was a mic back there, and then you want to bring the mic up front over here? Yes, go on.
Hello, I just have a question. I'm not sure if you ever get asked this question from investors or co-founders. So for your AI part of the business, have you ever get asked do you have concerns that OpenAI is going to take over that part of the business of yours? Like, is OpenAI like a threat to that part of the business? Thank you.
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, in general, I think you could assume that if you build a great business, there's going to be lots of angles of competition, and it's on you to kind of keep disrupting yourself and building something better. What I would say, it's a few folds. One, I do think for every business out there, the cost of developing software is going to just decrease dramatically, and traditional moats are going to erode. It used to be if people were stuck in your database, they couldn't go. Now it's, data migrations are going to get a lot easier. It's getting a lot faster to copy other features and go. And sort of some of the classics of what make businesses defensible get more important. That could be a brand or preference of what does AI prefer in the future. That could be network effects. Even if other people can build money movement software, is there less fraud? Is there faster payment times? Is there better terms because of kind of the network that it's running over get more important? So we think a lot about that. Two, is there certain data where you can hire a PhD level person, but there's still a training period you experience as someone comes to a new role or a new field? I think that's true of accountants as well. You can hire the best in the world, but there's kind of upspeed time, and that has to do with familiarity with a specific context, industry, and company. And so I think being more embedded in workflows and how companies operate get very increasingly important, and that's a big part of our strategy. So I think that OpenAI, the capabilities of these models is going to continue to increase dramatically is my consistent read. But being more embedded in building these aspects in your business is more important. What's helpful?
Yeah, it's on. Thank you so much. Very insightful. I have two very quick questions. First of all, we heard from Daniel what keeps him up at night. What is your concern? What is the biggest challenge ahead for Ramp and what keeps you up at night? Second quick question, very impressive as well. You speak fluent Mandarin. How does that help you at work? Like, do you look at China a lot in terms of innovation? Do you cooperate a lot as a business with a lot of Chinese engineers, for instance? Can you give us more insights to that? Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the question. So, I generally sleep pretty well, but there are days, and look,
Yorker who sleeps well. This is
it's
great.
It's you got to get out of the city sometimes. But look, I think that I'll put it this way. I remember day zero of the company, and at the time, it's really very clear what a company is. There was 3 people. And a sheet of paper from Delaware. That was it.
That's all the company was. And you raise money and you have like a product and strategy and things, and people somehow forget that all the company is a collection of people. And what keeps me up at night is you one day waking up, walking into the office and feeling like, what the hell happened? How do we lose the energy? How do we lose the focus? Why don't the most talented people in the world want to work here anymore? And when they're here, are they getting as much done? And it's easy to say, but the reality is that's actually the default state for most companies. Things slow down. They start to feel more like the DMV. Companies that used to be innovative get very complacent. And I think we're fighting that and trying to keep in the humility in your mind. Remembering like the most talented people don't have to a lot of work on what we're trying to build at all. We might be, it might be more profitable to not invest in research and development, to not find the best people, and to not deal with conflict. But you have to, ultimately. And so I think usually when I'm not sleeping well, it's on issues related to that. I think it's incredibly important, especially at the speed with which companies can move, people can build, and also the options for very talented people only increase over time. That's what keeps me out. In terms of Mandarin, it's a wonderful part of my life. I really enjoyed it. I think that probably what stuck with me the most is the rate of change in growth that happened there was almost like nothing I've ever seen before. When I was there, growth, the economy, the whole country. In China? There in China, yeah, thank you. It's mostly around 2009 through 13. It was growing 8-9% per year, which meant that every 10 years they were twice as well. It meant that you could visually see what happened when companies grew quickly, but it instilled in me a sense of, you can just build things, you can just do things. It seems easy to forget in lower growth places that everything you see around you was built by people who decided to go out and take a risk and do things. So kind of rewiring my mind to sort of remember, it shouldn't be unusual that you go out and take risks that actually can't be a condition. Whether you're starting a company or just working on new things to do it, I think it's real important. That was the amazing thing.
Eric, I cannot thank you enough. It was truly wonderful. Please join me in thanking Eric.